In this episode of Cemetery Road, I have found myself in the Silver Terrace Cemetery in Virginia City, Nevada. I'm very excited to be here right now because it's one of my favorite cemeteries, but also it's not ridiculously windy like it usually is, preventing me from actually recording an episode. Now, this cemetery is very large, and I am in one of many sections of this cemetery. This is the fireman's section. It's got a lot of stones here, a lot of wooden markers, stone markers, a lot of fencing that is unfortunately falling down, and as you can see over here, a lot of disrepair. Even though the Silver Terrace Cemetery is very old, it is well maintained because it is very historic here in Virginia City. But that does not mean that there isn't a lot of deterioration, a lot of broken stones due to vandalism, weather elements, all that kind of stuff. So we're gonna walk around. I'll show you some of the various sections, watch the B-roll, enjoy the scenery, and you'll probably understand why this is one of my favorite cemeteries that I've ever been to. So this is an interesting marker. This is in the fireman's section. Right here, as you can see, there is a wire border, an empty wire border. It is in the shape of a traditional marker, as you can see. Now, what this used to be, it used to have an actual wooden marker there that would have the information for the person buried in this plot. And over time, the wooden aspect of that particular marker has worn away. It's gone, lost to time, have no idea what happened to it, but that wire framing still remains. I found that very interesting. It is one of the more interesting aspects of the Silver Terrace Cemetery is its age lets you have various different style of markers all over throughout the different sections. Now you're going to see marble, you're going to see stone, you're going to see wood, and because of where it is in the hills of Nevada, in an old mining town, the wood ones are definitely worse for wear. Even the wooden border surrounding a lot of this, the plots are worn down, the wooden fencing worn down. The stone is remarkably well kept up for the conditions that it has to deal with here at this particular location. But a lot of them are also crumbling, depending on what the material was that made them. They will crumble away. Unfortunately, there was a lot of vandalism, probably still is a lot of vandalism here at the Silver Terrace Cemetery. People knocking down stones, people taking stones. I don't know exactly how many people are actually buried in this entire cemetery, but I guarantee way more than Catholic portion of the Silver Terrace Cemetery, and just walking around taking some photos of some tombstones. And I turned to go around a plot, and literally on the ground is just one of the wooden markers just laying there. I don't know if it belongs to this plot. I don't know if someone picked it up and just moved it and thought, oh, I'm not going to be able to take this out of here. But it is kind of a bummer to see that kind of stuff here. So I've gone as far as I really can in the cemetery. So the cemetery starts way over there, and I've walked all the way till what I assumed was the border. It's this hill. You can see this hill I'm coming down, and you can see there's a tombstone there. I looked over the hill, down the hill from up there, and saw that one and thought, oh wow, there's even more. And there's not much. I mean, you're just going down, but you can see the remnants of plots there, some wooden barriers, a stone that looks like the base of another marker. And there is a fence down there, fencing. So I'm assuming this is still part of the property, but obviously there's not much down here, but there are remnants that there were burials here. I don't know how many, again, with cemeteries this old. It is more than likely a lot of the people that were buried in this section, this area, are just mysteries. Names on a piece of paper in an office somewhere, but we don't know exactly where. One of the things in this section where the markers and the burial plot locations are kind of a mystery is I found this part right here, this grave-shaped depression right there, and it could be a burial spot. It could be somebody's grave. Someone who was buried probably in a wooden casket that did not have a barrier over it, a cement or stone covering to protect from exactly what seems to have happened, where the wooden coffin has aged and been affected by the elements, so much so that it's collapsed and the ground has sunk in. This is probably the most severe one I've ever seen because it kind of looks like someone dug it up in a way, but I don't know. But that is why we get those protective covers over the tombstones, or not the tombstones, the coffins, the burial entities now, because it prevents that kind of an issue. I will say, if you ever come to the Silver Terrace Cemetery in Virginia City, Nevada, just be prepared for an exercise, for a good long walk, because this place is so large that I'm not even covering half of it in this episode because I just don't got that kind of time. But I've made it all the way to the rear of the cemetery, and now I'm going to make my way back to the forward part, going a different route so we can see more of the sections. So every once in a while, you see a stone makes you stop and you need to know the story. Thankfully, because of the internet, a lot of these stories can be found out. Some of them, anyway. So I saw this stone right here. And as you can see, it says this person was murdered. So I had to find out who killed this man. And as you can see, this is the grave of August Buhaben, who was murdered. So I had to find out the story. So I looked it up, and it turns out August was one of the people who helped run a store here in town, and a man who was demanding money by gunpoint came in, obviously demanded money by gunpoint, and August attempted to stop the robbery from happening and was shot in the head, and the next day he died. And that's a huge bummer. The man who shot him was found later in his own home, hiding under his bed, where he cried and said he didn't do it, but obviously everybody knew he did, and he was hung later. I've been looking up the history of some of the people buried here, and this one kind of broke my heart a little bit. This is Ellen Killen, and I looked her up. She's the only name on the stone, but there are actually 3 people buried in this plot. Story goes that there was a house fire back in 1872. Ellen and her husband did not survive the fire. Their young son, who was only a couple years old at the time, did survive. He was adopted by a local family, but unfortunately he died a couple years after that, and after that he was interred here with his parents. There were stones for all 3 of them here, but over the years vandals have destroyed the other 2. 2 things on this one. This is the marker of Julia and Mary. Julia is the wife, Mary is the young daughter. Julia died during childbirth, and 14 days later, so did her young daughter, Mary. Now, this is a plot, obviously, a family plot. It's quite large. The husband, whose name is Thomas, he does not seem to be buried here. There are no burial records for Thomas. That brings me to my next point. When I'm here and I'm looking around, I see a lot of children's graves, especially in a situation like this where there's a large family plot that has been reserved, but there's generally only one marker. Now, it could be because the other markers have been destroyed, but more often than not, there's a child's grave or a wife's grave or a husband's grave, and then a seemingly empty rest of the family plot. And that's because a lot of times people would die here, they would get buried here, and then the surviving members of their family would move away, especially in Virginia City when the mines dried up and people moved on to seek fortune elsewhere. That meant their loved ones stayed here in a family plot that was never finished, never filled up. That's kind of sad. This next story is about Eugene and Anthony. They are natives of Ireland. They immigrated to America to find their fortunes here in the new land. They're friends, they're buddies. They came together. They came to Virginia City, Nevada. They worked in the mines, and unfortunately, Anthony was killed in a mining accident, and a few months later, at the very same mine that they both worked at, Eugene passed away as well due to a mining accident. already talked on this episode about plots, graves that have sunk into the ground because they did not have a vault to protect whatever the person was buried in. This is another really good example of that. So as you see, the stone is in horrible condition, broken, lying on the ground. The fencing, the wood fencing around is destroyed, but really it's that giant sink right in the middle. There's two people buried here, and it's very, very clear that they did not have a burial vault to protect the integrity of their plot, and it has dropped significantly. Here's one I find a little surprising. This particular plot, it's a smaller plot. I don't know if it's for a child or not, but it is super thick, well-made, super strong metal, but there is nothing inside. As you can see, no stone, no marker. I don't know if the marker was made of wood and that's why it's gone, or if it was stolen by vandals, but I have a hard time believing it was a wooden marker, something made so cheaply, when the ironwork is so sturdy. As I wander around looking at the history of a lot of the people that are buried here, this one was really unfortunate. This is Harriet Ann. She died from a gunshot wound inflicted during a 4th of July celebration while people were firing their weapons up into the air. Somebody accidentally shot her and she died. So I'm going to take my leave of the Silver Terrace Cemetery here in Virginia City, because I've been here for over 2 hours and I haven't even scratched the surface of what we could talk about and look at here at this location. I have probably been to this cemetery more than any other cemetery I've ever been to in my life. And every time I come here, I find something new to look at, to observe. Thankfully, this time I've got a phone with internet that allowed me to research a lot of the stones here and find out more about the history of the people here. What I did discover was a lot of mining accidents, a lot of scarlet fever, a lot of consumption, food poisoning. I mean, we saw someone who was murdered. I'm pretty sure that's not the only one here, but it was a rough life back then. You were not guaranteed old age, and it is shown by the stones remembering those who came to this land, worked in the mines, and tried to make a better life for themselves. I highly encourage you, if you are ever in Virginia City, stop at the cemetery. Make sure you leave yourself plenty of time, because there is a lot of ground to cover, a lot to look at. But remember, always be respectful, always be safe. Until next time, I'll see you then.